everybody. I read an article in The Guardian that was posted on Facebook a couple of weeks ago about this new fad, apparently called cortisol face. Now, I suffer from something called Cushing's disease, which has a symptom that includes a round red face called moon face. It's actually not as bad now as it has been over the past couple of years, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. It was just kind of frustrating to me that what is a very serious medical condition could become a sort of TikTok fad. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what Cushing's disease is and the so-called cortisol face is and what it is not. And then for those of you who are unfortunate enough to have it, like me, how I've managed to lose quite a lot of weight with it, which was actually pretty difficult. Okay, so what Cushing's disease, or my endocrinologist prefers to call it Cushing's syndrome, and what that is. Well, there are two kinds of it: endogenous and exogenous. Basically, endogenous Cushing's disease is when you have a tumor in your brain, in your pituitary gland, that causes you to produce too much cortisol. And exogenous Cushing's disease, which is much, much more frequently found, it's an excess of cortisol in your body because you've been prescribed steroids. Now, you don't take like a steroid cream for a couple of days and get Cushing's disease. We're talking about high doses of steroids over long periods of time. In my case, I've been taking steroids for 10 years before I got Cushing's disease. I've been taking it for rheumatoid arthritis, and I also have type 1 diabetes, and the interaction of steroids with diabetes is something quite serious. So as you can tell, it's a complex medical thing. It can be something that you get from the treatment for other complex diseases. It is not something you get from just being really stressed. So as well as the famous round red face, the symptoms of Cushing's disease that I personally have experienced are weight gain, like extreme weight gain, like 3 stone or about 42 pounds, if that's the way you measure it. You get raised heart rate, you get raised blood pressure. You can probably see I have a little bruise on my eye here. You bruise all over the place, even though you haven't hurt yourself. Your periods stop. Probably the worst thing is the mood swings, because you've got too much cortisol in your body, and cortisol is the stress hormone. You're constantly on edge. You're very irritable, and this anxiety eventually leads to depression, so kind of mood swings and mood problems. So overall, it's a pretty serious condition, and it needs to be monitored and treated by an actual qualified doctor and endocrinologist. It's not something that you're going to go online and find like cortisol detox diets. I mean, oh, please. Seriously. So what Cushing's disease really isn't, and what the so-called cortisol face, which is actually referred to as moon face, technically, in medical circles, what it is not is just being really stressed and gaining a bit of weight because you're stressed. That is not what it is. If your face gets a bit bigger, now I'm not passing any judgment on people for gaining weight. I think the reasons that people gain weight can be quite serious, and they're very varied, but mostly it happens because there's been a lot of calories versus movement. And that's the how. The whys, I know, are very complex, and I'm not passing judgment on anyone, but it's not the same as having an endocrinological imbalance. You could be very, very stressed and have something very traumatic happen, and you would not get cortisol excess in your body to the extent that your face would blow up. That is a medical thing. So I've managed to lose so far over a stone of the 3 stone that just piled on with the Cushing's disease. I had a long period of incredible frustration because I had been eating the diet that I normally eat, which, because I have diabetes and rheumatoid arthritis, is a fairly low calorie diet. And I just kept gaining and gaining and gaining weight. And every time I stepped on the scale, I had gained more weight. I tried various weight loss programs, which was problematic because a lot of them aren't really geared for type 1 diabetes, where you're insulin dependent. There's a lot of things you can do if you're type 2. But because of the risk of low blood sugars, hypoglycemia with type 1, things like Weight Watchers and various plans that I tried just weren't tailored for my particular medical situation. And what was frustrating to me is that the control of 2 of my most serious conditions depends on being a healthy weight. And I needed to lose weight, and the GP was saying, we'd like you to lose a bit of weight, but I really couldn't. I was also slated to have knee replacement surgery, and I really wanted to lose some weight for that, because generally people gain weight after it. So I was putting a lot of effort in, and I was seeing no results, and eventually it happened. Now, I even found articles online that say that you can't lose weight with Cushing's disease, and I did. But little disclaimer here, this worked for me in my particular medical setup, and every step of the way I am being monitored by a team of doctors. And the diabetes clinic, I have an endocrinologist, I have a dietitian, I'm seen by physiotherapists, I'm seen by a rheumatologist. I have a lot of people monitoring this. That would be my first piece of advice, is don't go it alone. It's too serious. Cushing's disease is, or Cushing's syndrome is, a serious medical problem, and it needs medical attention, not crap from the internet. That was another big thing that I did. I came off Facebook groups. One was just a little bit too complicated, even though it was run by people who were medically knowledgeable, and others involved patients trying to advise and diagnose other patients when they weren't medically qualified to do so. For example, one fool told me when she heard that my Cushing's disease had led to what's called adrenal deficiency, where because my body doesn't make its own cortisone, it's coming from the steroids. If I forgot to take the steroid tablets, I could go into adrenal crisis, which means basically I could die. It'd be really serious. This is something that happens when you have Cushing's syndrome. But this non-medical person informed me that this was Addison's disease. Now, if I had Addison's disease, it would mean I didn't have enough cortisol, so I'd actually be really thin, really weak, the opposite of everything that you see before you today. So steer clear of the internet, especially Facebook support groups. That would be my biggest bit of advice. How I eventually lost the weight was by going on a very low calorie diet, which I did with medical supervision. I'm not going to tell you the number of calories that I ate or what I ate, because it wouldn't be helpful for you to follow the template that works for me, and also because it was fleshed out with a doctor and with a dietitian, and if you have Cushing's disease, you're pretty much going to need to do the same thing. I have this great personal trainer who helps get me moving, which has been particularly good for my rheumatoid arthritis, but it's starting to work for the Cushing's disease too. And so I make time to move and program that time into my days. The biggest thing, however, has been working with a rheumatologist to lower the dose of steroids that I'm on. Now, in my case, because I'm now steroid dependent and my body doesn't make its own cortisol, and your body really needs cortisol, I'll never come off steroids. I'm always going to be on them. But it was just trying to taper them down to the level where I didn't have the Cushing's disease symptoms. I left out of the symptoms when I was talking about them. The hump. I seriously got a hump. I saw it once when I was recording a song for TikTok and was very depressed about it. And the endocrinologist said, don't worry, it's reversible. And if you're feeling horrible at the moment, it is reversible. It's just about taking those sensible steps. And I think the biggest thing is having the right, not the wrong support. So far, as I say, I've lost 1 stone, but what I'm happy about is that my face, which had been, as you could probably see from the photographs at the start of this video, is starting to return to its own structure, and I look a bit more like myself, because actually one of the worst effects of Cushing's syndrome or Cushing's disease is not feeling like yourself. I mean, I have a friend who has it who doesn't want to go out anywhere, and I actually felt that too. I felt self-conscious, especially since my job involves making videos and online training courses, and I would be looking at my image when I'm editing the videos, and it just was horrifying to me. I don't necessarily think that bigger means less attractive, but I just didn't look like me. It's like I suddenly turned into a golf ball overnight, and it's not just that you've gained weight, it's that you have a hump, and that it all goes on your face and the way that your face looks, and that is upsetting. And I think there is that sort of social anxiety that comes with that. So if you are experiencing that, it can be broken. It takes an awful lot of work though. What I do is I follow the plan that, again, has been medically sanctioned for me to follow. And every 8 weeks, I get a break week, which doesn't mean that I go totally nuts, because then I would gain half the weight that I'd lost. But I'm allowed to eat more calories and have more freedom in that week, and that kind of helps you stick to the plan. It's probably going to take me an entire year until I've lost all the weight. This is November and I started doing this in August, so you will be in this for the long haul, unfortunately. But I'm starting to feel so much better. I'm bruising a little bit less. Periods have come back. Mood is an awful lot better. And just, it's nice to be able to wear clothes that I want to wear, because actually, at the height of the Cushing's disease, it was just about what can I actually fit into that doesn't feel too tight and constricted. And I didn't even really get to think about how I looked or whether or not I liked the clothes. And so that wasn't me historically. I always liked to shop for clothes. Now I can do that again, which feels amazing. So if you're feeling at a low point in Cushing's disease, I think it's good to accept that that's going to happen. It's part of the journey, but you can get better. If you have a round face and you think that it's cortisol face, you've never taken a steroid in your life, and you most certainly don't have high blood pressure, high heart rate, loss of periods, bruising all over the place, then it isn't cortisol face. And it's probably worth chatting to the doctor about, as opposed to like reading up about stuff online that you probably don't have that's going to make you feel really anxious.